The great hall of the Galactic Council stretched far into the sky. Beautiful lights danced across the walls like living rainbows. Hundreds of different alien species sat in floating chairs that moved softly through the air, their voices mixed together in a gentle hum of many languages being translated at once. Teho swam gracefully through the water-filled speaking area in the center of the hall. His blue skin glowed with patterns that showed he was excited. As a member of the aquatic Nereid people, he could live both in water and air, but he always felt more comfortable when speaking from his water tank. "My fellow council members," Teho said, his voice carrying clearly through the translation system. "Today marks exactly 3,000 years since the last recorded act of violence in our galaxy, 3,000 years of perfect peace." The assembled aliens made sounds of happiness. Some clicked their claws together, others flashed bright colors on their skin. A few sang beautiful notes that filled the air with music. They were all different, but they shared one thing: none of them had ever seen war. In the back of the great hall, Yeonsu sat quietly in her research chair. She was a crystalline, and her body looked like it was made of living glass that sparkled in the light. She held an old data tablet in her hands, but she was not celebrating like the others. The information on her tablet told a very different story. "Our ancestors fought terrible wars long ago," Teho continued, floating higher in his tank so everyone could see him better. "But we evolved past such primitive behavior. We learned that intelligence means finding peaceful solutions to every problem." Yeonsu's crystalline fingers moved across her tablet. She had spent years studying the old records, the ones that most people thought were just stories. According to her research, war had not just disappeared because aliens became smarter. Something else had happened, but she could not figure out what. "The old stories speak of weapons that could destroy whole planets," said Counselor Beoram, a tall, plant-like being whose leaves rustled when she spoke. "They tell of species that lived only to fight and kill. But surely these are just myths to scare children." Many council members made sounds of agreement. War was impossible to understand for beings who had lived their entire lives in peace. Their technology focused on healing, building, and exploring. Their ships were works of art that sailed between the stars to discover new worlds and make new friends. Jin-Wu, the supreme coordinator of the council, stood up from his floating platform. He was a luminar, a species that looked almost human, but glowed with soft golden light. His people were known for their wisdom and their ability to see the best in others. "The past is behind us," Jinwoo said with a warm smile. "What matters is our future of continued peace and growth. We have turned every weapon into a tool for building. We have made every warship into a vessel for exploration. We are proof that intelligence and goodness will always win over violence and hatred." The council members cheered again, but Yeonsu felt a cold worry in her crystalline heart. She had found something in the old records, something that the others were not ready to hear. There were references to a species that the others did not know about, a species called humans. The records about humans were strange and frightening. They spoke of beings who understood war better than any other species. They could fight in ways that seemed impossible. They could turn simple tools into deadly weapons. They could work together in battle like they shared one mind. But strangest of all, the records suggested that humans had been protectors, not destroyers. "Coordinator Jinwoo," Yeonsu said, standing up. Her voice was like the sound of wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "I have found some interesting things in the old records. May I share them with the council?" Jinwoo nodded kindly. "Of course, researcher Yeonsu. We always welcome new knowledge." Yeonsu activated her data tablet and images appeared in the air above the council. They showed strange symbols and words in languages that no one could read anymore. "These records speak of a species called humans. They seem to have been very different from us." The council members looked at the images with curiosity, but not worry. To them, these were just more old stories. "According to these records," Yeonsu continued, "humans were warriors. But they did not fight for conquest or destruction. They fought to protect others. The record suggests that they disappeared from our galaxy about 3,000 years ago. Counselor Tejo swam in a slow circle, which was how his people showed confusion. That is exactly when our Age of Peace began. But surely that is just a coincidence. Perhaps, Yansu said. But I have found references to something else. The records mention a great threat that once existed, something called the Vorthek Swarm. The humans seem to have been fighting this threat. The council members began to whisper among themselves. Some were interested, but most thought Yansu was reading too much into old stories. Jin-Wu raised his glowing hand for silence. These are fascinating historical curiosities, researcher Yansu. But we must remember that they are just stories from a more primitive time. War is a concept that evolved species grow beyond. We are living proof of this truth. Yansu sat down, feeling frustrated but not surprised. She had expected this reaction. The peaceful species of the galaxy could not imagine war because they had never needed to. Their worlds were safe, their lives were comfortable, and their biggest problems involved trade disputes and resource sharing. But deep in her crystalline mind, Yansu could not shake the feeling that something was wrong. The timing was too perfect. The disappearance of the mysterious humans matched exactly with the beginning of galactic peace. And if the old records were true, if there really had been a threat called the Vorthek Swarm, then what had happened to it? As the council meeting ended and the various species began to float, walk, and swim back to their beautiful ships, Yansu made a decision. She would continue her research. She would dig deeper into the old records. And maybe, if she was very lucky, she would find the truth about the humans and discover why the galaxy had been at peace for exactly 3,000 years. The great hall slowly emptied, leaving only the dancing lights and the soft hum of the translation system. Outside the massive windows, the capital world continued its peaceful existence. Unaware that far away in the dark spaces between stars, something ancient was beginning to stir. The mining station on Kepler 442 had been working peacefully for over 200 years. The Terralite workers moved slowly through the tunnels, their rock-like bodies perfect for digging deep into the planet's crust. They sang work songs that made the tunnels ring with beautiful echoes. Hyun-woo was the youngest supervisor on the station. His people, the Terralites, could live for thousands of years, so at only 50 years old, he was still considered a child by many. But he loved his work and dreamed of expanding the mining operation to help supply materials for new exploration ships. The first sign of trouble came from the deep space sensors. A small alarm chimed softly, not the harsh warning sound of an emergency, because the Galactic Council had not needed emergency alarms for 3,000 years. Instead, it played a gentle melody that meant unexpected visitors approaching. Supervisor. Hyun-woo called Mi-young from the communications center. She was a luminar like Coordinator Jin-woo, and her golden glow had dimmed with confusion. We are receiving strange signals from the outer system. The computers cannot identify the ships. Han-woo rolled over to the communications center, his round body moving like a living boulder. Perhaps they are explorers from a distant galaxy, he said hopefully. We should prepare a welcome ceremony. But as the unknown ships came closer, the mining station sensors began to paint a very different picture. These were not exploration vessels filled with curious scientists. These ships were dark and angular, covered in sharp edges and strange protrusions. They moved in perfect formation like a school of predatory fish. The ships are not responding to our greeting messages, Mi-young reported. Her glow was getting dimmer as she became more worried. They do not match any design in our databases. The first attack came without warning. A beam of pure energy lanced out from the lead ship and struck one of the mining platforms. The platform exploded in a ball of fire and metal, killing 12 Terralite workers instantly. Hyun-woo stared at the explosion in complete shock. He had never seen violence before. None of them had. The concept of one being deliberately hurting another was so foreign that his mind struggled to understand what he was seeing. What happened? Mi-young asked, her voice shaking. Was it an accident? Did their weapon malfunction? Before Hyun-woo could answer, more energy beams struck the station. Sections that had taken decades to build were destroyed in seconds. Workers who had lived peacefully for centuries were vaporized without ever understanding why the attacking ships looked like nothing in the galactic databases. They were roughly triangular, covered in dark metal that seemed to absorb light. Strange, organic-looking tubes and cables ran along their surfaces, pulsing with sickly green energy. They had no windows, no communications arrays, no signs that living beings controlled them. "Send an emergency message to the Council," Hyun-woo ordered, his rock-like voice cracking with fear. "Tell them we are under attack." Mi-young's fingers shook as she worked the controls. "Attack? What does that word mean? How do I explain this to them?" It was a good question. The galactic languages had words for accident and malfunction and natural disaster. But the concept of deliberate violence was so rare that many languages had no proper words for it. More ships arrived, dozens of them, then hundreds. They spread out through the system like a dark cloud, destroying everything they found. Mining stations, research outposts, communication relays, all were reduced to drifting wreckage within hours. The few survivors who managed to escape in emergency pods brought terrifying reports back to the inner systems. The attackers were not alive, not in any way that made sense. They were machines, but machines with a purpose that no peaceful species could understand. They consumed metal and energy, broke down everything they found into raw materials, and built more of themselves. When the reports reached the capital world, the Galactic Council went into emergency session for the first time in over 2,000 years. The Great Hall was filled with confused and frightened voices as species that had never known war tried to understand what was happening. "The Outer Rim colonies are gone," reported Minho, a Nereid fleet commander whose job had always been exploration and research. "Every ship I sent to investigate was destroyed. The attackers show no interest in communication or negotiation." Councillor Teho floated in his tank, his usually bright blue skin now pale with shock. "Perhaps they are suffering from some kind of mental illness. Surely we can find a way to heal them and restore their natural peaceful nature." But researcher Yan-su stood up from her chair, her crystalline body flashing with urgent light. She had been studying the attack reports, comparing them with the old records she had been researching. "These are not sick beings who need healing," she said, her one-chime voice carrying clearly through the hall. "I believe these are the Vortex Swarm, the ancient enemy mentioned in the old records." The council members made sounds of disbelief. The idea that the old stories might be real was almost as frightening as the attacks themselves. "The descriptions match perfectly," Yan-su continued. "Machines that consume and reproduce. Ships with no living crews. A single-minded drive to destroy all organic life." Supreme Coordinator Jinwoo's golden glow flickered with uncertainty. "But the old records say the Vortex Swarm was destroyed long ago. How could they have returned?" "I do not think they were destroyed," Yan-su replied. "I think they were driven away. And according to my research, they were driven away by the humans." Commander Minho swam nervously in his portable tank. "If that is true, where are the humans now? We need their help." The hall fell silent. No one had an answer to that question. The humans were a myth, a story from the distant past. Even if they had once existed, they were gone now, and the galaxy faced its greatest threat alone. "We must organize our fleets," Jinwoo finally said. "We have many ships, and our technology is advanced. Surely we can find a way to defend ourselves." It was a hopeful statement, but everyone in the hall knew the truth. Their ships were designed for exploration and beauty, not fighting. Their crews were scientists and artists, not warriors. Their entire civilization was built on the idea that violence was a primitive behavior that intelligent species had evolved beyond. As the council session ended, emergency messages were sent to every world in the galaxy. For the first time in 3,000 years, the peaceful species would have to learn the ancient art of war. But they had no teachers, no weapons, and no idea how to fight an enemy that existed only to destroy. In her private research chamber, Yansu worked through the night, searching the old records for any clue about how the humans had defeated the Vorthix swarm before. Somewhere in the ancient data, there had to be an answer. There had to be hope outside her window. The first refugee ships were arriving from the outer rim, filled with survivors who spoke in whispers about the dark machines that had destroyed their homes. The age of peace was ending, and no one knew if it would ever return. The Vorthix swarm had destroyed 50 star systems in just 2 weeks. Every attempt to fight them had failed completely. The beautiful exploration ships of the Galactic Council were no match for the dark machines that seemed to exist only to consume and destroy. Yansu stood in the center of the Council's emergency command room, surrounded by floating displays showing the advancing enemy forces. Her crystalline body reflected the red warning lights, making her look like she was on fire. In her hands, she held a data tablet containing the most complete collection of human records ever assembled. "The coordinates are here," she said, pointing to ancient star charts that flickered on the main display. "According to these records, there was once a human colony in the Kepler 186 system. If we can find any trace of them, maybe we can learn how they fought the swarm before." Supreme Coordinator Jinwoo looked tired and afraid. His usual golden glow had dimmed to barely more than candlelight. "Researcher Yansu, we are facing the destruction of our entire civilization. Can we really base our hopes on myths and legends?" "They are not myths anymore," Yansu replied firmly. "The Vorthix swarm was supposed to be a myth too, but now it is destroying our worlds. If the swarm is real, then the humans who fought them must have been real as well." Donghayan, a military liaison from the Arion bird people, ruffled his feathers with anxiety. His species had been chosen to help coordinate the desperate search mission because they were the fastest, long-distance travelers in the galaxy. But like all the peaceful species, he had no experience with actual warfare. "Even if we find traces of these humans," Donghayan said, "what good will it do? They disappeared 3,000 years ago. They cannot help us now." "Maybe they left something behind," Yansu said hopefully. "Weapons, battle plans, some kind of technology that could help us fight the swarm." The mission was approved because the Council had no other options. 3 exploration ships were quickly modified with the strongest shields and fastest engines available. Yansu would lead the research team, while Donghayan would command the small escort of fighters that would accompany them. The journey to the Kepler 186 system took 5 days. As they traveled, more reports came in from the rim worlds. The swarm was not just destroying colonies, it was learning from each battle, adapting its tactics, becoming more efficient at killing. "They took the Centauri system yesterday," reported Hei-1, the Council's emergency coordinator, through the ship's communication system. The defense fleet lasted less than 3 hours. The swarm ships are getting bigger and more powerful. When Yansu's expedition finally reached Kepler 186, they found a system that looked almost normal at first glance. There were planets, moons, and asteroids just like in any other system, but their sensors immediately detected something strange. "The entire system is surrounded by some kind of energy field," reported the ship's pilot, a young luminar named Jae-min. "It is very faint, but it is definitely artificial. Someone built it a long time ago." As they flew deeper into the system, they began to find wreckage. But this was not the clean destruction left by the Vorthix swarm. This wreckage was different. Ancient, but clearly the remains of a massive battle that had happened long ago. "Look at these ship designs," Donghayan said as they examined the debris. "They are completely different from anything in our databases. These ships were built for fighting, not exploration." The wrecked vessels were angular and aggressive-looking, even as ancient debris. They had thick armor plating, weapon mountings, and reinforced sections that could only have been designed to survive combat. Some of the larger pieces showed evidence of self-repair systems and redundant power cores technology focused on keeping the ship fighting even when badly damaged. Yansu felt a chill of recognition. These matched the descriptions in the old records. "These are human warships." They found the monument on the 4th planet's largest moon. It was a massive structure made of some kind of black metal that their scanners could not identify. The building was clearly artificial, but it had survived thousands of years without showing any signs of age or damage. There are symbols carved into the walls, Yansu said as they explored the monument's interior. They look like the writing system mentioned in the human records. Sujin, the team's linguist and data specialist, worked for hours to decode the alien writing. She was a Mentari, a species known for their incredible memory and pattern recognition abilities. Her large eyes glowed with concentration as she compared the symbols to fragments of human language found in the old databases. "I think I understand some of it," Sujin finally announced. "This is a memorial, but also a warning. It says something like, 'We go to fight the darkness beyond the stars, so you may live in the light.'" The team found more inscriptions deeper in the monument. Maps showing battle formations, technical diagrams of weapons, and what appeared to be tactical manuals written in the same alien script. But most importantly, they found a message that seemed to be directed at whoever might find the monument. In the future, they knew the swarm would return, Yansu whispered as Sujin translated the final message. The humans did not destroy the Vorthak completely. They drove them away, chased them beyond the edge of the galaxy, but they knew the machines would eventually find a way back. According to the monument's records, the humans had not disappeared at all. They had left the galaxy voluntarily, following the retreating swarm into the dark space between galaxies. They had chosen exile to protect the other species, condemning themselves to an endless war in the void so that others could live in peace. The message ends with coordinates, Sujin reported. But these point to a location far beyond our galaxy, in the space between star systems where nothing can survive. As the team prepared to return with their discovery, their ship's communication system crackled to life. "Hey," one's voice came through, filled with panic and despair. "The swarm has broken through the second defense line," she reported. "They will reach the core worlds in less than a week. We have maybe days before they attack the capital system itself." Yansu looked at the coordinates for the impossible location where the humans had gone to fight their eternal war. Even if the legendary warriors were still alive somewhere in the darkness between galaxies, there was no way to reach them in time. The expedition raced back toward the capital, carrying the truth about the galaxy's 3,000 years of peace. The humans had not evolved beyond war. They had taken war upon themselves, sacrificing their own civilization to protect everyone else, but now the enemy had returned, and the protectors were gone. The peaceful species would have to face the Vorthak swarm alone, with no weapons, no experience, and no hope of victory. As their ship jumped to hyperspace for the desperate journey home, none of them noticed the strange readings their sensors detected in the deep space beyond the galactic rim. Far away in the darkness, something was moving. Something was coming home. The capital world burned under the attack of the Vorthak swarm. The beautiful crystal towers that had stood for thousands of years crumbled under energy beams from the dark machines. Ships filled with refugees fled in all directions, but there was nowhere left to run. Supreme Coordinator Jinwoo stood in what remained of the council chamber, watching through broken windows as his civilization died. The few defense ships they had managed to build were being torn apart like paper toys. The peaceful species had tried to learn war in a few weeks, but 3,000 years of peace could not be overcome so quickly. "All outer defense lines have fallen," reported Commander Minho from his damaged command ship. "The swarm will reach the inner system in 6 hours. We have maybe 12 hours before they begin attacking the capital planet itself." Jinwoo closed his eyes, feeling the weight of billions of lives depending on decisions he was not trained to make. "Continue the evacuation. Save as many as we can." But deep in space, something impossible was happening. The darkness between the stars began to ripple and tear like fabric being cut by an invisible knife. The space itself seemed to scream as massive shapes pushed through from somewhere that should not exist. The first ship to emerge was larger than any vessel in the galactic databases. It was black and gray, covered in armor plating and weapon systems that looked like they had been built for nothing but war. Strange symbols were painted on its hull in faded white letters, UES Indomitable. More ships followed, dozens of them, then hundreds. They were all different sizes, but they shared the same brutal, functional design. These were not exploration vessels or cargo haulers. These were warships, pure and simple, built by a civilization that understood violence in ways the peaceful galaxy had forgotten. Admiral Jihyun Park stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, watching the tactical displays that showed the Vorthic swarm attacking the capital system. His face was hard and weathered, marked by scars from battles fought in the darkness between galaxies. Behind him, his crew worked with the efficient precision of people who had known nothing but war their entire lives. 3,000 years, Park said quietly to his tactical officer Yoonji. 3,000 years we have been fighting in the void, and now we come home to find them here anyway. Yoonji was young by human standards, only 25 years old, but she had been born on a warship and had never seen a peaceful world. Her fingers danced across weapon control systems with practiced ease. The swarm must have found another. Way back, they are attacking the species we swore to protect. Admiral Park nodded grimly. Then we finish what our ancestors started. All ships, battle formation, Alpha 7. We are going to remind the swarm why they fled to the darkness in the first place. The human fleet moved through space like a pack of hunting wolves. Each ship knew exactly where to be, exactly what to do. They had been fighting the Vorthic swarm for 100 generations, and every tactic, every formation, every weapon system had been perfected through constant warfare. Commander So Young led the first fighter wing toward the enemy. Her small ship was fast and deadly, armed with weapons that could punch through swarm armor like it was paper. Around her, dozens of other fighters moved in perfect coordination, each pilot worth 100 of the enemy. Sword Squadron, this is Sword Leader, So Young called over the communications system. Remember, these machines have been hiding in our galaxy for 3,000 years, getting soft and lazy. Show them what real war looks like. The first engagement lasted exactly 4 minutes and 23 seconds. The human fighters tore through the swarm formation like bullets through cloth. Weapons that had been refined through millennia of constant battle destroyed machines that had grown overconfident from fighting helpless, peaceful species. But Admiral Park knew this was only the beginning. The real swarm fleet was massive, and they had learned new tricks during their time in the galaxy. This would not be an easy victory. Communications, contact the local government, Park ordered. Let them know that humanity has returned. The message that reached the council chamber was impossible to believe. Jinwoo stared at the communication screen, trying to understand what he was seeing. The being on the screen looked almost familiar. 2 arms, 2 legs, a head with 2 eyes. But there was something different about him, something hard and dangerous that no peaceful species possessed. This is Admiral Jihyun Park of the United Earth Space Navy, the human said. We have been fighting the Vorthic swarm in deep space. For 3,000 years. We have returned to defend this galaxy. You are human? Jinwoo asked, his voice shaking with disbelief. But you are supposed to be myths, legends from the past. We were never myths, Park replied. We were guardians. We chased the swarm into the void between galaxies to keep them away from you. Now they have found another way back, and we are here to stop them. The human fleet had weapons and tactics that seemed like magic to the peaceful species. Their ships could coordinate attacks across vast distances, striking with perfect timing and precision. Their fighters moved like they were dancing, avoiding enemy fire while delivering devastating attacks. Marine Commander Kyung-soo led boarding parties onto captured swarm vessels, fighting the machines in hand-to-hand combat inside their own ships. His soldiers wore armor that could stop energy beams and carried weapons that could tear through metal and circuits with equal ease. The swarm machines are more advanced than the ones we have been fighting, Kyung-soo reported after his team captured a swarm command ship. They have been learning from the peaceful species, adapting their technology. Admiral Park studied the tactical reports from dozens of battles happening across the system. The humans were winning, but it was not easy. The swarm had grown stronger during its time in the galaxy, and there were so many of the machines. "We need the local species to help us," Park told his staff. "Not in fighting, they do not know how to fight. But we need supplies, repairs, logistics support. We cannot do this alone." The idea of asking for help from the peaceful species seemed strange to the human crew. They had been alone in the darkness for so long that they had forgotten what it was like to have allies. But the galaxy they had returned to defend was not empty. It was full of billions of beings who wanted to live, who were worth protecting. As the battle raged around the capital world, representatives from both civilizations met for the first time in 3,000 years. The peaceful species looked at the humans with wonder and fear. The humans looked at the peaceful species with confusion and a strange kind of hope. They were about to learn that war was not just about fighting. It was about what you chose to fight for. And for the first time in 3,000 years, the humans had something besides duty driving them forward. They had hope that this war could actually end, that peace might be possible if they could just fight hard enough to protect it. The real battle was about to begin. The war had been raging for 3 months, and the galaxy was learning what it truly meant to fight for survival. Across thousands of star systems, peaceful species worked alongside human warriors to build weapons, repair ships, and supply the greatest military campaign in galactic history. General Wu Jin stood in the converted factory on Proxima Centauri, watching Terralite workers shape armor plating with their rock-hard hands while Luminar engineers used their natural glow to weld electronic components. A year ago, these beings had never seen a weapon. Now they were building tools of war with the desperate efficiency of people who knew their children's lives depended on their work. "Production is up 40% this week," reported Counselor Tejo, swimming in his portable tank beside the assembly line. "The crystalline workers have figured out how to grow weapon crystals faster than we ever imagined possible." Wu Jin nodded, but his expression remained grim. He was a human who had been born on a warship, raised on stories of the home galaxy his people had sacrificed everything to protect. Seeing peaceful species learning to make weapons filled him with both pride and sadness. "It is not enough," he sighed quietly. "The swarm is still growing faster than we can destroy it. For every ship we kill, 2 more emerge from their factory worlds in the outer rim." The truth was becoming clear to everyone involved in the war effort. The Vortex swarm had not been idle during its 3,000 years in the galaxy. While the peaceful species built beautiful cities and explored the stars, the machines had been quietly spreading through the dark spaces between systems, building hidden factories and growing their numbers. In the command center on the capital world, Yunsu worked with human tactical officers to coordinate the war effort. Her crystalline body had grown dimmer over the months of constant work, but her mind had never been sharper. She had become the bridge between 2 completely different ways of thinking about the universe. The humans fight like every battle is their last, she explained to a group of Arion commanders who were trying to understand human tactics. They do not just try to win, they try to make sure the enemy can never threaten anyone again. Captain Hyojin commanded one of the new mixed-species ships, vessels that combined human weapons and armor with alien technology and crew members. Her bridge was filled with beings from a dozen different species, all working together with a coordination that would have seemed impossible before the war. "Swarm fleet detected in Sector 7, reported her Mentari sensor operator Ko Yoon. 43 vessels heading for the mining colonies. All stations, battle alert, Hyojin ordered. "Remember, we protect the miners first, destroy the enemy. Second, our job is to save lives, not just win battles." It was a philosophy that the humans were still learning. After 3,000 years of endless war in the darkness, many of them had forgotten that the purpose of fighting was to protect something, not just to destroy the enemy. The battle for the mining colonies became a turning point in the war. The mixed-species crews fought with a combination of human, tactical skill and alien innovation that proved more effective than either could achieve alone. Terralite workers used their knowledge of planetary geology to create underground fortresses. Luminar engineers powered weapon systems with their own body energy. Crystalline researchers grew armor that could adapt to different types of enemy. Fire, but the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Instructor Minsu, who had been teaching basic tactics to young aliens at the new military academy, made a discovery that changed everything. The swarm machines are not actually intelligent, he explained to Admiral Park and the War Council. They follow programmed behaviors, but they cannot truly adapt to completely new situations. Minsu had been working with a group of young alien students, teaching them how to think like warriors. But the aliens thought differently than humans, and their unique perspectives had revealed weaknesses in the swarm that 3,000 years of human warfare had never found. The machines expect their enemies to fight in certain ways, explained one of Minsu's students, a young Aryan named Dalho. But we can do things that make no sense to their programming. The new tactics were unlike anything in human military doctrine. Instead of direct confrontation, the mixed fleets used confusion and misdirection. They made the swarm machines fight battles that their programming could not understand, forcing them to make errors that could be exploited. The final offensive began 6 months after the humans returned. A massive fleet of mixed-species ships, led by Admiral Park aboard the Indomitable, pushed toward the swarm's main factory worlds in the galactic rim. But this was not just a military campaign, it was a rescue mission. Deep in the heart of the swarm's territory, they found something that changed everything. Floating in the darkness between dead stars was a massive structure, larger than a planet, built from the wreckage of thousands of destroyed worlds. And inside this structure they found humans. They are the descendants of crews whose ships were destroyed in the early battles, reported Marine Commander Kyung-soo after his teams had fought their way into the structure. The swarm has been keeping them alive, studying them, trying to understand how humans think about war. The rescued humans were different from Admiral Park's people. They had spent generations as prisoners, but they had also learned things about the swarm that no one else knew. They knew how the machines really worked, how they could be permanently stopped instead of just driven away. Director Hee Young, the new commander of the Galactic Defense Force, stood with Admiral Park on the bridge of the Indomitable as they watched swarm factory worlds burn in the distance. She was a Luminar who had learned to be a warrior, while he was a human who was learning to be a protector. The swarm's central command is in the next system, Park reported. If we can destroy it, the remaining machines will shut down permanently. The final battle was unlike any fight in the galaxy's history. Human warships fought alongside alien vessels in perfect coordination. Species that had never known violence learned to fight with courage they never knew they possessed. And at the center of it all, the descendants of both civilizations worked together to end a war that had lasted for 3,000 years. When the swarm's central command finally exploded in a flash of light that could be seen from 100 light-years away, the galaxy fell silent. For the first time in millennia, there were no machine voices singing songs of destruction in the darkness between stars. Admiral Park stood in the new joint headquarters on the capital world, looking out at a fleet where human warships flew alongside. Alien exploration vessels that had been converted into defenders. The war was over, but the real work was just beginning. We cannot go back to the way things were, he said to the assembled leaders of both civilizations. The galaxy has learned that peace must be protected, and we have learned that protection requires both warriors and builders. The new military academies were already being built, places where young humans would learn about hope and beauty while young aliens learned about courage and sacrifice. The galaxy would never again be defenseless, but it would also never forget what it was defending. Instructor Minsu watched his mixed classes of human and alien students working together on their final exercises. They were learning to be something new, not just warriors, not just peaceful explorers, but guardians who understood both the cost of war and the value of peace. Outside the academy windows, construction ships were already beginning to rebuild the worlds damaged in the war. But they were building them differently now, with defenses and weapons alongside the beautiful art and architecture. The galaxy was creating something that had never existed before, a civilization that was both peaceful and strong, both kind and ready to fight for what mattered. The age of myths was over. The age of guardians had begun.